Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com. I am your host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, the immortal Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
Immortal. I like that descriptive, Mike. Thank you for that.
I figured I'd give you something to build your confidence a little bit. We do have some NFL news today as the Titans and Vikings suspend in-person activities after multiple Titans players' personnel test positive for COVID-19. It seems that Tennessee and Minnesota have been asked to shut down everything until Saturday, Sam. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it seems like it's 3 Titans players and 5 personnel, 5, I guess, coaches or something like that, someone in the coaching staff. I mean, it seems like they'll play because the Pittsburgh Steelers have said already they're planning on playing on Sunday. So I think we'll actually have a game. The Vikings have not had any positive tests, so I think the schedule will go off as usual, and unless something else comes up. But right now, it sounds like we're still going full force for Sunday.
Now, the Titans, though, they're not allowed to meet in person until Saturday. It gives the Pittsburgh Steelers a huge advantage for a big game coming up.
It does, and I don't know how they'll augment that. I don't know if they have more Zoom stuff. I don't know what the NFL will do with that. It certainly doesn't seem fair, I guess you could say, in terms of what other teams are going to be able to do versus what Titans are going to be able to do. But I think the league will do everything possible to avoid changing the schedule.
All right, let's go ahead and let's look at last night's game. The Kansas City Chiefs beat the Baltimore Ravens 34-20, and Patrick Mahomes showcased what I think can be called an unfathomable skill set. He runs in the first touchdown. He tosses an underhanded shovel pass to Anthony Sherman for a touchdown. Throws a beautiful deep ball. In the first half, he was 19 of 27. He generated a quarterback rating of almost 140. And I think that you really see the separation between Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes in this game.
Well, yeah, it was clear as day there. You see, Lamar Jackson doesn't even throw for 100 yards. And on the other hand, Patrick Mahomes has basically a clean sheet. He basically has almost a perfect game. The only player who might have had a better performance this week is probably Russell Wilson. Mahomes goes out there against supposedly one of the best defenses in the NFL, and this clearly beats the crap out of the Baltimore Ravens. And Lamar Jackson doesn't even keep his team competitive for most of the game.
Well, I think this. I think that the Baltimore Ravens are not the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs, even though they might be the second best team in the league, because you touched on this yesterday when we picked the game, and we both picked the Chiefs, and for the same reason. When you look at this, it's a bad matchup for the Ravens defense because the Ravens have some great DBs, but I don't think their DBs are conducive to stopping a team with as many weapons and as much speed with the ability to go deep as Kansas City has.
Yeah, we saw. I think Marcus Peters got beat for one of those touchdowns. I'm pretty sure. Peters, even when he's back to the Rams, he's susceptible to speed. He's not a fast corner in terms of being able to stick with guys who can just blow you off the line like Tyreek Hill or McCole Hardman. And even Marlon Humphrey, he's not that way either. And with Earl Thomas no longer there, they don't have great safety play over the top. So they're really not a team meant to cover guys like Hill, Hardman. They can't keep up with those players.
Yeah, and I think the Chargers are, which is why you saw the Chargers stay in the game and almost beat the Chiefs, because the Chargers are a team that can come with their down 4 and get pressure without having to blitz. If you blitz Patrick Mahomes, you're going to lose to Patrick Mahomes. And I think the key here is to be able to get a push up the middle, have your edge collapse the pocket, force him to stay in the pocket and throw the ball. And it eliminates him running around and improvising, which improvising is Patrick Mahomes' biggest skill, I believe.
But you mentioned that like underhanded flip he threw for a touchdown there. I was watching that. I had like pause the game and go back and like replay it because I just couldn't believe what I saw there. He really pulls off things that you just don't think of or things you normally don't implement in games. And Mahomes, when he's just making stuff up sometimes, I think it's honestly when he's at his best. That's when you have to be most afraid of him. Baltimore cannot get him out of his comfort zone.
Yeah, and Becky Cargill says hi. Hi, Becky. I think Becky is an Eagles fan. She used to listen to our NFL Pick'em show. So great to see Becky back with us. I want to thank everybody that's listening. And when I look at this, I think the Chiefs are beatable. I just don't think the Ravens have the components to beat them. And for the Chargers, it's a shame they don't have a quarterback, because if they had a quarterback and a healthy Derwin James, I mean, the Chargers are the kind of team that can beat them. And when we look at the AFC, What teams are best built to beat the Kansas City Chiefs?
Two come to mind immediately, and I think these are both obviously not shoe-ins to beat Kansas City, but I think Buffalo and probably Indianapolis. Indianapolis, my biggest issue is quarterback. I think you have to have a somewhat complete team to beat the Chiefs, and Philip Rivers, to me, I mean, you've got to keep him. You got to keep him on a pitch count. You really can't do that if you're going to beat a team like Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Buffalo, on the other hand, you've got Josh Allen. We saw it in their team so far is capable of scoring a lot of points in games, keeping up potentially with Kansas City's offense. They have a deep threat in Stephon Diggs. I think they're probably the best bet. I would throw maybe Tennessee in there, but we saw it really didn't work out in the AFC Championship game this past year.
Yeah, but I think Buffalo and Tennessee are the two main ones. I don't think the Colts can. I don't think the Colts can score the points to keep up with them because I don't think the Colts defense is good enough to slow this team down right now. I think this offense, especially with Clyde Hilaire, I think it's a lot better offense than what the Colts played against last year. And the thing about him is he's a guy that can run the ball inside. So when I look at the Buffalo Bills, you got Josh Allen. They can score with them. And I really think with Sean McDermott, they're a hard-nosed team, and I think this is a defense as to get healthy will get better and better. So I think Buffalo is definitely a team that can. I would say the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I don't see the ability to score enough points to hang in with them. So I think they're going to have difficulties there. But it is a team that I think can get pressure with their defensive front without having to blitz. But like I said, the offense, that's the problem with this. Like the Chargers can be in a game with them, but they can't beat them because you got to be able to make the plays down the stretch to be able to beat Patrick Mahomes. And the tough thing is here, the way Kansas City plays is different than Baltimore, and it makes them tougher because if Baltimore falls down a couple touchdowns, Baltimore's screwed because let's face it, and I know I always catch hell for this, but Lamar Jackson is not a very good quarterback. I don't care what anybody tells me. When I watch teams that know how to defend him, they can pressure up the middle with a Chris Jones, who was huge last night, maybe the best interior pass rusher in the game outside of maybe an Aaron Donald and a Geno Atkins if he's healthy. And I think Chris Jones may be better just as a pure pass rusher than either one of those guys. And I think when you look at that, Baltimore's offense is limited with Lamar Jackson. I mean, when they play a team that jumps up on them, he presses, his throws are not accurate. So Lamar Jackson is a great talent, but I don't think Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, Sam.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to see a little bit more from him, but you're right. He certainly was not near a top 5 quarterback last night. And my biggest issue with Baltimore is they rely so much on the running game. When they get behind, like they did against Kansas City, they can't come back. So that when they take that running game out of the equation, that offense becomes one-dimensional and starts falling apart. We saw it happen yesterday. And like you said, when Lamar Jackson is pressed to score and score quickly, that really doesn't fit his style of play. So in that sense, he is not on the same plane as
how can you be a top 5 quarterback if you can't be pressed and forced to score and you do it? Because isn't that what separates the top 5 or 6 guys from everybody else?
You could say that. I don't know if there's really 5 guys in the league who would do that consistently right now. There's maybe 3 who I can count on every week.
Well, I would say this: Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen. I'll give you Josh Allen right now. I mean, even last year when he struggled, he was able to make plays at the end of games to win games. And the thing to me is this: do you really trust that Lamar Jackson in the last 2 minutes of the Super Bowl, needing to go 80 yards with 2 timeouts against a Super Bowl type of defense, is actually going to be able to make the throws to win the Super Bowl in that case?
No, there's only 4 or 5 guys who can do that.
I think there's more than 4 or 5. I think Tom Brady's still a guy. I think Drew Brees is still a guy that can do that. I mean, put it like this: would you rather see a 43-year-old Tom Brady dragging his ass on the field against your defense in the last 2 minutes of a Super Bowl, or would you rather see Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I'll never bet against Tom Brady. I'd rather see Lamar out there.
Well, the same thing with Drew Brees, the same thing with Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, right there. There's 5 guys.
Yeah, I don't know about Drew. Drew's kind of pushing it at this point because I haven't seen him play huge in a big game.
Again, Drew Brees running on the field with Michael Thomas, healthy.
That's true.
Scares me a hell of a lot more than Lamar Jackson. And the other problem is this. I mean, maybe I'm putting too much of this on Lamar Jackson. Maybe more of it should fall in the Baltimore front office for not getting more receiving threats. They keep giving him running backs all the time. But when at some point are you going to treat him like an NFL quarterback and try to go out and find him some wide receivers to throw to?
Well, yeah, that's a big thing. You saw what Arizona did with getting DeAndre Hopkins for Kyler Murray. young dual threat quarterback needs to develop a little bit more. Give him a superstar wide receiver. Baltimore has not come close to doing anything like that for Lamar Jackson. I mean, their best guy, Marquise Brown? Marquise Brown is the number 2 or number 3 receiver at best. So they really haven't helped him that much in that aspect of the game.
All right, let's go to your quarterback power rankings, which this week I have a lot less complaints about. So you've actually fallen in line with the company line here. The top 3, I think you have in the correct order, and I think they're the 3 best right now. Russell Wilson at number 1, Patrick Mahomes at number 2, Aaron Rodgers at number 3. I don't see how anybody can debate any of those 3.
Yeah, I mean, they've been phenomenal this week. They were all pretty much perfect. No turnovers from any of them. Russell Wilson goes out there, beats the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are putting up a lot of points against the Seattle defense. Patrick Mahomes, of course, we saw them dominate last night. And Aaron Rodgers, again, almost another perfect game for him. He was kind of the guy the media was talking about whether he was falling off a cliff or starting to decline over the offseason. He's certainly come out and started playing with a vengeance this year.
All right, number 4, Josh Allen. Number 5, Ryan Tannehill. So I think I've had an influence on you.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, Josh Allen, too. He's still making mistakes. I think he turned the ball over, twice
you
the
other day?
You
had him like 17th last week, didn't you? Or was that
I had him like 17th week 1. I had him 6th last week. I had him 4th.
Tannehill 17th last week, I think.
Yeah, I've had these 2 guys low in the past, but now, you're right. I'm starting to see the light a little bit. I'm starting to see these guys kind of pull through. Josh Allen, of course, beats a pretty good Rams team, and he was clutch, like you said, clutch down the stretch. I think he's still making some mistakes, but overall, a much improved quarterback. I think he already has half the touchdowns he had in the entirety of last season, so he's doing much better than what I expected.
Well, the thing is this, Sam. The difference in between being a big-time quarterback and not being is being able to overcome your inadequacies. Mitch Trubisky doesn't overcome his issues. Baker Mayfield usually doesn't overcome his issues. Josh Allen and Ryan Tannehill have a tendency to do that. And I'll still bring up this. Ryan Tannehill, the one complete season he was healthy in Miami, except for the last game of the season, I think, that year, he took him to the playoffs. And with Josh Allen, I mean, a game-winning score of under 30 seconds left washes away all stupid mistakes you make.
That's true. As long as you win the game there, as long as you play well towards the end, it's really what matters. But a guy, you brought up a guy who I'm thinking about who needs to prove he can get past his inadequacies is Deshaun Watson. He's a guy I think I have living somewhere around probably 10 to 12 at this point. But he's someone who's got a bad team who needs to prove that, hey, I'm an elite quarterback. He needs to go out there at some point this year and prove that he can overcome the shortcomings of his organization.
Yeah, but I think it's really hard to overcome the shortcomings of an organization. And I think a guy like Deshaun Watson, his team's going to win 6 games because he's the quarterback, but you got to give him something else around him. I mean, we've seen other quarterbacks that weren't quite – I mean, you can't really compare people to guys like Tom Brady because it's unfair, especially in your, 3rd year in the NFL. But let's go to number 6. You've got Lamar Jackson, 15 for 18, 97 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 fumble loss. We've already talked about him. Then we go to Tom Brady. Tom Brady did not look as old this last week, Sam, and I think a lot of this could be just finally getting the timing down with these teammates.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, Gronk involved. Gronk's going to be some easy catching, basically some easy pass and catch for Brady this year. So I'm glad they got him involved because he really didn't do anything the first couple of weeks of the season. I think the Buccaneers are starting to hit their stride a little bit. I'm hoping Brady can carry over the excellence he had this past week into next week. And they're actually leading the NFC North now. I am the NFC South right now, so they deserve to be ranked higher. And Brady, I had it down at 15 this past week because I was really starting to wonder if he was ever going to get back to that peak form. He certainly looked much better this week.
All right, another one who worried us last week, looked much better this week was Drew Brees. He had the bad game against the Raiders. He definitely came back, played well against the Packers. Really, I think he had to fumble at midfield late in the game, which really cost him this game. And New Orleans defenses wouldn't let him down here, but he put up 30 points, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 7 incompletions on the day. Drew Brees at number 8.
Yeah, and that really wasn't his fault. I mean, Taysom Hill was the guy who fumbled that ball around midfield. So that's really on Sean Payton for putting Taysom Hill on the field when you have Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara. And even just saying James Winston's back quarterback. I don't understand why Taysom Hill has to be in the field during a clutch time like that.
No, and Alvin Kamara should have been the one touching the ball because he was one of the best players on the field that night. Now you got number 9, Dak Prescott, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. I think this is a stretch for Dak. I think Dak's got the weapons. Granted, his left tackle position is absolutely horrible. I'm not going to say it's a bad pick. I just think it's a little bit of a stretch to have him at number 9.
Yeah, but one of those interceptions was a last-second heave or a last-minute heave towards the end zone, so I don't entirely put that all on him. I do think the Cowboys should be more successful at this point, considering all the offensive weapons they do have. That's my one big shortcoming for Dak, is that you need to be better. You need to win more games, though, the offensive pieces you have.
Yeah, and I don't really have somebody I would put in that spot. I just think it's a stretch for everybody from here on out, because now we get to the point where you see a huge drop-off in the quarterback play. I do believe this. This may be nuts, but you got Joe Burrow at 17. I think Joe Burrow has played better than Matthew Stafford or Dak Prescott.
I don't know. Dak had a pretty good game the last week against Atlanta. Again, granted, it was Atlanta, of course. And Stafford, I think, has had only one good game at this point. Burrow's been consistent. He just has to go out there, and win a game. I know he doesn't have a supporting cast.
He can't win a game. He's playing with the Bengals. He got a tie. That's as close as you get to a win. I mean, at times, it's like he won 5 games all in one day.
Hey, they should have beaten the Eagles, though. They should have had at least one win along the stretch. I can't blame Burrow for any of it, really, but they should have had at least one win here.
No, and the sad thing is they had a better team on the field than the Eagles had, because, I mean, hell, the Eagles were missing everybody. They lost 2 of their best players during the game. All right, number 11, you got Deshaun Watson. If I had to pick those top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, Deshaun Watson might be my number 5 overall. I mean, that's how good I think he is. But I know you can't rank him much higher than what you got him, just because they are losing. But you got to remember, they've lost to the Ravens, Chiefs, and Steelers. And, they were pretty much in all 3 games. I mean, I think everything kind of fell apart for them early fourth quarter in the first 2. They played with Pittsburgh down to the end. But I think the fact that Deshaun Watson is why they're actually competitive in these games.
Yeah, could you imagine if they had a worse quarterback? If they had someone who's in the 20s on this list on that roster, they'd be doing terrible. So I think Deshaun definitely elevates his team, but it's hard to tell how good he is this year because the team around him is so bad.
All right, number 12, Derek Carr. I think that's about right. I think Carr, for the most part, this season's played well. 13, you got Cam Newton. I mean, the thing is this. I even heard people this morning talk about how New England was a contender just because of Belichick against Kansas City with the defense. You still got to be able to score the points, though. And right now, Cam has played well, but Cam doesn't look like he did 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's why he's in this kind of tier here, that second tier of quarterbacks. Really, like you said, you see a separation kind of between numbers 8 and 9, somewhere in that range. And I don't think Newton's going to be able to bridge that gap this year. He's a solid quarterback, but he's not a superstar anymore.
All right, number 14, Kyler Murray had a rough game. 15, Ben Roethlisberger, who has been consistent, not great, but you can see that kind of trending in that way. And when I look at these 2 guys, I think they're both guys that have a chance to make the playoffs. But I think the success of their teams, even though Pittsburgh's got a great defense, for them to actually make a run, Big Ben's got to be Big Ben of 4 years ago. I haven't seen that yet, but he is slowly getting better.
Yeah, he's improving, but I need to see more of the deep strikes, more of the immediate scoring they had back in 2018, 2017. Because at that point, Pittsburgh was a threat to score from anywhere. I mean, they could go 97 yards on one play.
Yeah, but that is also running with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, who was a stud at the time, which makes it a lot easier. I think what worries me here is it's been a while since Big Ben has had to drag a team on his back. And offensively, he's almost got to be that kind of guy now, and that's hard to do when you're almost 40 years old.
Yeah, I think really Pittsburgh's success this year is going to come down to whether or not they can consistently run the ball. They've had some success the first 3 weeks, but I want to see them do it against a much better team, because if they can run the ball, they'll be fine. If they have no running game, it's going to be much harder.
All right, number 16, Matt Ryan. You got to feel sorry for him. I think he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, but with a horrible organization, a horrible head coach. They have no defense. The offensive line's not that good. He gets, it seems like, a 50-point lead in every game and ends up losing because his team still doesn't understand to run the clock down under 5 seconds before you snap the ball. So I think Matt Ryan's in a bad situation. I think Joe Burrow's in a bad situation because there's no offensive line at all in Cincinnati. I mean, when Bobby Hart was not the worst lineman on the field for you, and he might have been the 3rd worst this last week, you've got major issues.
But yeah, we brought this up the other day. Joe Burrow took so many hits that game. I think it was 8 sacks plus all the extra hits he took. This is a guy who, I mean, he's not going to be healthy for a full year if you continue letting things happen to your superstar quarterback.
21 hits. He took 21 hits yesterday. He's taken like 40 or 42 hits in the last 2 games.
Yeah, and the one he had to go to the sideline for a little while because Malik Jackson basically launched into him. You're not going to be able to keep this guy healthy for even a full season if this keeps happening. If you're Cincinnati, you need to do something. I don't know if it's a trade deadline. I don't know if you just try to survive this year and then go all in the offseason, but you need to make some serious changes here.
Well, they need to make the changes right away because with the extra playoff, maybe 7 or 8 wins get you to the playoffs. You might as well take a shot at that. Plus, you don't want to get him killed before you get to next year. 18, Jared Goff. I have a huge problem with this. I think Jared Goff's played well 3 straight games. I think the first game, a little shaky. Game 2, he played well. Game 3, he played well. Almost came back from 28-3 down against a really good Buffalo Bills team. I still think you got a little too much hate for Jared.
Yeah, now I'm looking at the list again. I agree with you. Now I agree with you on this point. I think he should be higher. I was actually considering that when I looked at it this morning where I put Jared Goff. I saw he was down at 18, and I admit that's probably wrong. He should probably be higher. I think you could make the point that he should be higher than Matt Stafford.
Yeah, I think you can make a point to Jared Goff's top 10. Next up, you got Baker Mayfield, who, as long as he doesn't throw the ball too much, with the run game they got, he'll look good. I think this is about a correct ranking for Baker, though, because if not for 2 great running backs, I think this team would have issues.
Yeah, that ceiling I thought Baker Mayfield had, clearly he doesn't have it right now. I mean, I thought this guy could be potentially like top 12 kind of quarterback, but you cannot put the ball in his hands 30 to 40 times a game because he'll lose you the game. So, unfortunately, he's training towards the Philip Rivers kind of territory where you keep him on a pitch count.
All right, number 20, Kirk Cousins, 3 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. He kept his team in position to win the game. The Vikings are now 0-3, and I still think at the end of this season you're going to see this team. I think their opportunity, their window to win a championship is pretty much completely closed, and I think they're going to have to blow up this whole mess to be able to try to fix it.
Yeah, which stinks for them because they just paid Dalvin Cook a lot of money, so they really do have to reorganize this team. The defense is terrible so far. The offensive line is no good. Justin Jefferson was one of the lone bright spots for them the other day. They really need to reorganize this whole thing, and I could see now Mike Zimmer definitely getting fired, like you brought up before the season started, I believe. He's certainly in hot water.
All right, next up, you had Ryan Fitzpatrick at number 21. I mean, Fitzmagic, second week in a row, played really well. I can see that. 22, Nick Foles. This is really interesting because this kind of looks a little bit like the situation he fell into at Philadelphia. The only difference is earlier in the season, and he's coming in for somebody that was playing horrible, where before, he came in for Carson Wentz, who might have been the MVP that year until he gets hurt at the end of the year. But Nick Foles is a guy that seems to thrive in these situations.
Yeah, he really does. And coming off the bench, he played phenomenal. He had that one early interception, I believe, in the 3rd quarter. But after that, 3 fourth quarter touchdowns, he completely come back against Atlanta, the helpless Atlanta Falcons. But, I mean, really, Nick Foles has to be your star for the rest of the year now. And they're sitting at 3-0, I think. So they have a really good chance of making the playoffs here.
All right, next up, Gardner Minshew at 23, Phillip Rivers at 24, Teddy Bridgewater at 25. I think all of them are playing respectable. I mean, for being ranked this low, I mean, Gardner Minshew's not working with much around him. I think Phillip Rivers is a guy that as long as the Colts continue to run the ball, I think he'll continue to climb up your rankings because I think he is a guy that 17 for 24, 220 yards and a touchdown is good enough to make the Colts a playoff team if he can do it consistently.
Yeah, all 3 of these guys are serviceable starters in my mind. They're just not going to be the ones to go out there and win the game for you. You kind of see this as a lower tier quarterbacks than the guys we were talking about earlier. Because they're really, like I said, decent guys, but week to week, not going to be the ones to go out there and actually give you the win.
All right, Nick Mullins. I think Nick Mullins played great. It's I expected him to play well. I don't think I thought that I would expect to say he played great. Justin Herbert just makes a lot of mistakes. And Carson Wentz is in a bad situation.
Yeah, he's making more mistakes than anyone right now in football. There were just some throws. I think it's starting to get into his head, honestly, though, because there were just some throws he made the other day that shouldn't have been made, regardless of the weapons he had around him. He should not have made those. So I think the lack of an offensive line, the constant pressure defensive linemen are getting on him, the lack of receiving threats. I think those are starting to get in his head, and we're seeing him play out on the football field. He's kind of crumbling a little bit mentally here, and I'm worried about what's going to happen with him as the season progresses.
Well, and I've seen this before with other quarterbacks that have turned around and been great after that. You had in New England with Jim Plunkett, who was the number one pick in the early 70s, where the internal clock just gets sped up because you're so used to just getting hit. And it's what I'm worried about with Joe Burrow, because I think any quarterback that goes through this eventually is going to start to get a little bit gun shy. I think it can be saved, but watching Jason Peters at the end of his career is as painful as watching Muhammad Ali fight Larry Holmes in 1980, because it's basically a dude that should be able to do it, but he just can't anymore. And it's sad because Jason Peters is a guy you can make a case for being a Hall of Fame offensive lineman. It is a shame to see him end his career the way he's going to end his career.
Well, they kicked him back out to tackle. Really, if he stayed at guard, that probably would have been the best for him in terms of performance, but I think
he's done no matter what he's doing. I mean, he does not have feet, does not have hands. The only thing is maybe you would have mitigated the ass whooping by putting him at guard instead of tackle. But chances are with this Eagles team, whoever they put at tackle would have been terrible too.
Yeah, it really wouldn't have happened at this point. They're basically just finding guys off the street who can really help them out, because they are so beat up and banged up. Most of the starters in the offensive line at some point have missed at least a game this year. We're only 3 weeks in.
All right, and Sam Darnold, he's a guy we're talking about ruining. I know from reading your article, you agree that he's been ruined by the Jets, and it's a shame because I think Sam Darnold has a lot of potential, but the organization in New York has basically destroyed his chances.
Yeah, I don't know where you go from here for Sam Darnold. I would expect that you would get out probably after your 4th year and go somewhere else. But really, we're starting to think about long-term career aspects with Sam Darnold at this point, because there's no immediate future with him in New York. The Jets are so bad. This rebuild will take at least half a decade before they even become competitive again. And this is one of the worst teams in the NFL by far.
Well, actually, the Jets, except for the occasional blip like 2010 or 1986 or 1983, I mean, have been in a perpetual rebuild moment or rebuild mode ever since they won Super Bowl III. So, and it all comes back to the lack of organization. And, the Jets seem to always do the wrong thing. I mean, back in the early 80s, they looked like they were about to become a Super Bowl team. And then they changed head coaches. You fired one for the other. It got a little bit worse. They made the playoffs. Then they sucked for most of the 90s. And then they get Bill Parcells and everything's fixed for a couple of years. Then he gets the hell out of there and they fall apart again. So I think this is an organizational mess by a family that probably shouldn't own an NFL football team. Number 30, Daniel Jones. Everybody from here on down sucks. That's just the way it is. And Dwayne Haskins, at some point, damn, you got to get rid of him and see if Alex Smith, Kyle Allen, somebody's got to be better than this, because with the defensive front they've got, they could win this division or at least make that last playoff spot with 8 wins, which I think they could do with just decent quarterback play.
Yeah, really, they're tied with Dallas for first in the division right now. You have a chance. This is not a lost season. But the more I watch Dwayne Haskins, the more I think it is. Because unless you replace him at some point, there's no future for you in this division. There's no future for you in the playoffs. You need a quarterback who will at least not kill you during the games. And Dwayne Haskins so far, he's been that guy who's been ruining their chances to win these close games.
All right, Sam, anything else you want to discuss before we wrap it up?
No, I think we just about covered everything.
All right. I want to remind everybody you can follow Sam Teets at SamTeets33. You can follow me at Grueling Truth. We're here at 1 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday. We will be back tomorrow. You want to talk NFL power rankings, Sam?
Yeah, sounds good.
That way you can trash my rankings for a change.
Yeah, that'll be great.
All right. So remember to check out Replenishing Care and Technologies, our main sponsor for the show, at rcandt.com. You can hear us live every day or see us live every day on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Periscope, Twitch, and you can hear the podcast later on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, over 300 different platforms. So for now, for Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.